All right, what up, folks? It's your man, 100 Days of Summer. In this video, I want to talk about why I no longer support Black Lives Matter, the movement, or the organization. It basically boils down to me doing my own research. The things that I found have changed my perspective over the last few months, and I want to share those things with you in this video. But before we get into that, I just want to say that you don't have to believe anything that I say. You should do your own research and fact check everything that I say. Because I think that you'll be surprised at some of the things that you actually find. All right, so the first thing that kind of sent me on this search was when I saw in an interview that Patrisse Cullors, I think that's how you say her name, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, said that she was a trained Marxist and a trained organizer.
We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
That really didn't mean anything to me until I stumbled upon this book by a guy named Manning Johnson called Color, Communism, and Common Sense. Manning Johnson was a black communist in the 50s, and he wrote a book basically detailing a strategy that began to be implemented in the 30s, I believe it was, where Stalin had the idea of using racial tension and creating racial tension and conflict to bring down capitalism in America, to try to overthrow the government. And they were using black people as the spearhead for that movement, basically using us as expendables. And in Manny Johnson's book, he details all these things. So in chapter 1, he says, after 2 years of practical training in organizing street demonstrations, inciting mob violence, how to fight the police, how to politically throw a brick and hide, I was ready, in the opinion of my leaders, for a top communist school. So when Patrisse Cullors says that she was trained, a trained organizer, a trained Marxist, so was Manning Johnson. And he details the exact strategies of what he was trained in, how that is implemented in his time in the 50s. But if you read that book, you'll see the exact same strategies that was being implemented then are being implemented today. One of the strategies he says is creating doubt, a lack of confidence, suspicion, setting up situations that bring about racial bitterness, violence and conflict, putting forth demands so unrealistic that race relations are worsened, and then attacking anybody in disagreement as reactionaries, fascists, calling white people Ku Kluxers and calling black people Uncle Toms. That constituted the pattern of communist operations. That's what he was trained in doing. You see that exact same thing happening today. Now, that was in the 50s. Manning Johnson released his book in 1958, and then he died in 1959. Some people believe that he was assassinated for releasing this information. You can do your own research on that to see. But as Manning Johnson realized that the party was only using blacks to create racial tension in America, that was in the 50s. In the 30s, a man named Revels Caton came to the exact same conclusion. All right, so Revels Caton, one of the best known advocates against racism, he was also a communist, a black communist, left the party after realizing it was only interested in talking about race when that issue applied to party strategy. It also says in this article that although the Communist Party did significantly contribute to the improvement of the lives of people of color, its legacy should not be uncritically assessed. Its narrow focus on issues that related directly to Marxian theory. Remember, Patrisse Cullors said she was a trained Marxist. Its narrow focus on issues that related directly to Marxian theory and party platform caused it to ignore issues it should have addressed, while claiming to support principles on which it actually had not taken a stand. So you see there, once again, they were making strides for blacks, but that was the front of the organization. The underlying agenda was to cripple capitalism, to bring in a Marxian ideology, and then basically usher in socialism and capitalism into America, overthrowing the government. The exact same strategies that were used then in the 30s are the same strategies that were being used in the 50s with Manning Johnson, the same strategies being used today with Black Lives Matter. Behind each of these movements in the 30s and the 50s were white communists using blacks. You can see the exact same thing with Black Lives Matter, and I'm about to show you. So in the 60s, after Manning Johnson passed away, there was two domestic terrorist groups that rose. They were white groups. One was female and one was all gender. So the first group was the Weather Underground, a domestic terrorist group in the 60s. The other group was M19. One of the leaders of the Weather Underground is a man named Eric Mann. Patrice Cullors says in an interview that Eric Mann was her mentor. She says that he created the organization called the Labor Community Strategy Center, which sounds very much like the type of organizations Manning Johnson lists in his book. She says it was her first political home, and basically that Eric Mann was her mentor. So when she was trained in being an organizer and a Marxist, she was trained by Eric Mann, one of the leaders of the domestic terrorist group, the Weathermen, a communist organization. All right. That's one connection to Black Lives Matter being backed or their elders being white communists. All right, so when you want to donate to Black Lives Matter, you have to donate through a company called or organization called Thousand Currents. Thousand Currents is the fundraising and fiscal sponsor for the Black Lives Matter global movement. The woman who she served as vice chair of the board of directors for Thousand Currents, was an active member of revolutionary left-wing movements whose illegal activities included bombing U.S. government buildings and committing armed robberies. So the person who sits on the board of the fundraising and fiscal sponsorship for Black Lives Matter was also a convicted domestic terrorist. And then the mentor of one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter was also a convicted domestic terrorist. They were all white communists. These are the people behind Black Lives Matter. So when you wonder why they move the way that they move, it's very simple. Just like Manning Johnson said, they were trained at organizing street demonstrations, mob violence, fighting the police, like all those same things, throwing a political brick, and hiding. The same exact things that they were doing then, they're doing today. Now, the other thing that I thought was very interesting outside of I guess this is another communist connection, is the fact that in 2015, Black Lives Matter held an event in Harlem where they invited the dictator of Venezuela, the communist nation Venezuela. They invited him to be honored in America in 2015.
So I want to just first off say thank you to the government of Venezuela and President Maduro. We really appreciate your participation in this event and your leadership.
The same year, a 14-year-old was killed during a protest in his country by the police. So during that time, the people were protesting this guy and they were being killed in the streets. But this is a time when the leaders of Black Lives Matter, an organization against police brutality, invites this man to the country to be honored. They call him a comrade. They consider him a brother and a friend. Then later that year, one of the other co-founders of Black Lives Matter, her name is Opal Tometi. She visits Venezuela, and while there, she tweets out, this is a place of intelligent political discourse. A place of intelligent political discourse. That's a place where they killed their protesters, where the president literally gave them the authority to kill protesters, to use violence against protesters. So that part, the only thing those two people have in common, the only thing that Maduro, and his name is Nicolas Maduro, the dictator, the only thing that him and Black Lives Matter have in common is the fist of communism. That's why Black Lives Matter's logo is a black fist. The logo for communism is a red fist. It's the exact same thing. In 2018, I believe it was, Maduro's country had the they had the most police killings in the entire world. This is the person that they invited to America to be honored, Black Lives Matter. That doesn't make any sense to me. So when I see those types of connections happening, when you put all that together, there's a clear picture of what's actually going on. The movement is not about the betterment of black people, just like it wasn't with Rebels Caton, just like it wasn't with Manning Johnson. The movement is about overthrowing the government, overthrowing and bringing down capitalism and ushering in the Marxian ideology of socialism and communism. That's what it's all actually about. And they're just using blacks and racial tension the same way Manning Johnson was using it. Now, the other thing that I don't want the video to be too long, but I want to say these last two things. The other thing is the term Black Lives Matter is a strategy. You know what? Maybe I'll mention that in the next video. Maybe that's what I'll do, because I don't want this video to be too long, and I want to talk about this here. I'll mention what I'm about to say about how they use how Black Lives Matter, the slogan, is an old propaganda tactic from the 20s. And I'll talk to you about that in the next video. But in the meantime, leave your comments, questions, criticisms, name calling, whatever it might be. Every comment helps, so please leave it. And we'll have further discussion in the comment section. I'll see what you guys think about all this stuff that I've said, and then I'll see you on another video afterwards. All right, I appreciate your time and attention, because you can't get that back. Y'all have a good one, and I'll see you on the comments. All right, peace.